The original Mispillion lighthouse was built in 1831, but this model represents the second Mispillion lighthouse, which was a 65-foot square tower rising from one corner of a two-storey Gothic-type woodkeeper's house, and this was built in 1873. Around about 2001, a fire started by lightning destroyed most of the tower of the lighthouse. The kit I used is from seaportmodelworks.com. The kit comes with excellent instructions, and just take time to identify all of the different parts. Make sure that they're there and you get some idea of how it all fits together. What I do then is get out all of the wood and split them and label them so it's easier to find later on. So the first thing I started on was the lighthouse itself with the windows and the railings, and then started to assemble parts of the tower. This was easy to do with a bit of tacky glue. Just follow the clear instructions. There's photographs of every stage, and that will take you through the whole of the build of this model. Here I just followed the instructions to make sure that all the wall pieces were properly braced so that when I start to apply paint they don't warp. Once the bracing's finished, I then apply the trim. Just make sure that you follow the instructions really carefully so that you get the bracing into the right place, because this helps the model stick together as you start to assemble it. And here I'm just bracing the rest of the walls. I use Eileen's tacky glue. It's much better than normal PVA. I painted the corner trim a shade of grey, and I applied it with a sponge so that gave it a peeled paint look. I only put a tiny amount of paint onto the sponge and dab it all over lightly, and I've used about 5 different shades of grey, making sure that each layer dried before I applied the next, and that really gives it a good depth of tone. Finally, I use an India ink and alcohol wash. Use the same technique on all of the doors and windows. I lightly sponge lots of different shades of grey and then follow it up with an alcohol wash. Just using the same technique for the lighthouse railings and the windows. On the railings I've used again about 5 different shades of white, off-white and different shades of grey. I want the railings to be really rusty, so I'm using here 5 different shades. And I dab them on, one shade at a time, with the sponge, again using hardly any paint, but you must make sure that each layer dries before you add the others. So this is the first layer of a dark rust. And I just continue the process with the 5 other colours until I get the look that I'm really happy with. Using the 5 colours gives a really good rusty effect. It really is worth all of that effort putting in 5 different layers, because it just gives you a wonderful peeling paint look, which even on close-up shots just look great. Next I add all of the corner trim. So here are all the main parts for the main building wall and also for the tower walls, and so far all I've done is brace them on the back so that they don't warp when I start to apply the paint. And I've also added the edging strips, and as you can see I have already painted the edging strips, so I just need to be careful that when I do paint the main clapboard that I don't paint over the edging strips. Ideally I should have put them on afterwards. Next stage is to start to weather these clapboards. The first thing I'm going to do is try and make some of these clapboards look old by lifting some of them, using my wire brush just to put in some extra marks. And then what I'll do is apply a stain. Now I make my stain out of India ink. Two colours that I use here, a nut brown and a black, and I just water them down with a bit of isopropyl alcohol into a thin wash, one of these little cups here. And the idea is just to take away the new look of this wood. So here I've just mixed a bit of the black and the brown India ink with some alcohol, and I'm just going to test it out on a spare bit of wood just to see what the colour looks like. Now I don't want it to be too dark. What I like about the India ink as well is some of the little bits just leave tiny little spots of pigment on the clapboard, which gives it quite a nice effect. If you want it darker, you can simply go over it twice. So here's one with the stain. By the time it dries, it's going to dry a little bit lighter. On this board you can see that where I haven't mixed it thoroughly, some parts are black where it's picked up the black India ink pigment, and that's ideal because you don't want it all to be a uniform colour, but if you do, just make sure that you mix your wash thoroughly beforehand. So what I've done here is just use my knife to lift up some of the wood in different places. Just very gently slid my knife along the clapboard and raised some. It doesn't matter if they splinter, like that one. And then if you go back in with the wash in those areas and allow the wash to sink in from underneath, you can just highlight them. So it looks like all the dirt and grime has got into those. So now all my pieces are stained, and you can see that the bits of clapboard that I've lifted and the bits I've damaged at the bottom have just taken the stain a bit better. So it looks like old rotten wood. Now if you just wanted to do a timber building that hadn't been painted, then this is ideal. You can leave it just like that. But because this is going to be the lighthouse and I want it to look like a lighthouse that is dilapidated, then what I'm going to do next is sponge on some white and some off-white to look like peeling paint. So the first colour I'm going to use is the Vallejo off-white. Just grabbed a bit of sponge and put a bit of the paint onto the sponge, and then dab most of it off, and then start to apply the white to the building. And it's always best to start off light. You can always go back over it. And then when applying the paint, think of areas such as underneath the roof eaves where the paint might be more protected from the weather, so you want to go a bit heavier up there. As well as using the sponge, you can get a fine brush And again, just get a tiny amount on the brush. And then just roughly in the direction that the clapboards travel. Just drag along a bit of the paint. I'm just going to put a little bit more paint right up here in the eaves, where these clapboards would have been protected from the weather. So hopefully here we've got a bit of an idea of what it might start to look like. I'll finish them off and come back to you. So this is the finished piece so far. What I've done is dry brushed some of the clapboards, and as you can see I've left plenty without any paint on at all. So once I've done all of the clapboard sides, what I'm going to do then is put a wash over them, and what that does is it ties it all together. After that I can use weathering powders just to make it look a little bit darker in some places. I want the lighthouse to have sort of a rotten wood type effect at the base. So what I like to use is this colour, which is light green from Vallejo. Just mix that with a tiny bit of alcohol just to loosen it up a bit, and then just apply that from the bottom. And because it's quite watery, it will just bleed up along the boards, and then just add a bit underneath these broken boards that are just starting to rot. So it looks like you've got some algae growth. I'm not sure if you can see that. It is quite subtle, but when the model's photographed you're definitely going to be able to see that. And if you want the effect to be a bit heavier, then just use less alcohol when mixing the green. You can supplement this with weathering powders afterwards. So hopefully you can see the subtle green effect there. So here are the finished clapboards. All I've done is, after I finished brushing them and sponging them with the different shades of white, I've just applied that brown and black India ink wash mixed with alcohol right over the top of them. And as you can see, it just ties them all together. The windows in this kit are really easy to use because the back's self-adhesive, so you don't have to use any glue. I find it easier, rather than use my thumb, is to remove the self-adhesive paper with a knife. And then it's as simple as sticking it onto the acetate. In this kit, the acetate is already pre-cut, so you simply pull them apart and you have your windows. So here you can see I've assembled all of the walls. The instructions are pretty clear, it wasn't too difficult. The important thing is to make sure that the joins are nice and secure. You can see inside all of the bracing. Some of the windows I've put in, but I've decided to leave the rest until I've finished because I just kept knocking them out. They're really delicate. So the next stage is to build the tower. The tower's made up of 4 sections like this. So the sides of the tower wall are covered with a grey shingle, and this kit comes with it. It's a paper shingle. What I'm going to use are these real cedar shingle sheets, and these are really easy to cut. It takes a long time to put them on, but at the end of the day it makes a really nice finish. So that's what's going to be happening next. So here's the tower completed some hours later. I haven't shown you how to cut the shingles, it's pretty easy. Use an X-Acto knife, and they're about 2 or 3 millimeters wide and simply stuck on with some Eileen's tacky glue. It's best just to take your time. Now you'll see that these are applied roughly because I wanted it to have a look of broken shingles. Making the tower is pretty easy. The instructions are clear. These 2 round discs are held together with the cross bracing. Make sure each step's thoroughly dry before moving on to the next step. Then this piece of cardboard is glued to it. I used super glue because it just wouldn't hold with a white tacky glue. I decided for this part of the lighthouse I was going to make a deck, so I just had some scrap wood and I put that together to make it look like decking rather than the cardboard that was provided in the kit. For the roof I decided to make it corrugated iron look because I just felt it gave some extra interest to the old dilapidated lighthouse. And it's made from corrugated cardboard, which I've painted up to have a rust effect. I had some of the corner bracing left over, so I just added this to the roof just to give a bit more definition. Once the main house was completed, it was time to add the actual lighthouse tower, and I had to remember to make sure that I drilled holes through all of the bits because I wanted to put working light, so I needed room for the wire to go through. Here I'm just making up the porch roof and putting some rafters to the underside of it. Just sticking the timber down with some tacky glue. I really like using these shingles from Best Trains. They come in different colours, but the great thing is they're self-adhesive, so they're really easy to use. I then use my knife to lift some of the shingles up so it looks a bit more dilapidated as a building. Assembling the porch itself is really easy, but it is fiddly, and using superglue helped. I want to make sure that the LED flashing light doesn't bleed through the building, so I've painted the whole of the inside with a black acrylic, and then I've just used black cardboard paper to make a divide on the inside, and that's going to stop you from seeing from one window through to the next and will also help with any light bleed. I finished the building with some weathering powders and also with ammo washes, mostly black and some light rust and some greens. And I've added some Woodland Scenics fine leaf scatter and fine leaf foliage and some tufts from Martin Welberg products. And I hope you enjoy the final building as much as I do. And of course, a lighthouse must have a light. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a comment and subscribe. I really appreciate that. Thank you for watching.